So, Community, why is this show so great? Let's get into it. I only have 30 minutes and I got a lot to get through, so let's just jump right in. So, the first reason that I think the show Community, apparently my dog does not agree. She has something to say about that, but she's never seen it, so we're not listening to her. The reason why I think the show is so great, first and foremost, has to do with the characters. The characters are amazing. I love all of the characters, and even the characters that I don't love, I love them because I don't love them, if you understand what I mean. So let's go through them. Jeff Winger, Aba Nadir, Britta Perry, Annie Edison, Pierce Hawthorne, Troy Barnes, Dean Pelted, Chang, and honorable mentions go to Magnitude, Frankie, and Rich. Jeff is Jeff. He's the heart, the soul, and the foundation of the show. The actor who played him who was the actor that played him? It was, what is his name? Hold on, guys. Joel McHale. Funny enough story about Joel McHale is I never liked him. I absolutely never liked Joel McHale. And my first introduction to Joel McHale was, what was the show that he did? He did a show on E! Years and years ago. That it was like a comedy show. It was like, you know what it was? It was the first real show where you had a comedian just commentate on the week's entertainment news or shows and things like that. I can't remember the name of the show. If you remember the name of the show, you can post it. You can post The Soup. It was The Soup. How could I forget the name of it? And that ran for quite some time. Like, I think it ran for over 10 years, The Soup ran. And I was just never a fan of it. I never thought he was particularly funny. It was like the first version of Tosh.0, which I was a huge fan of Tosh.0, which I think I might do a podcast about, just because I love the show so much and I loved him as a comedian. He kind of wind down as, the energy around our society started to change towards more wokeness. Obviously, that's the type of comedy he did was really it was extreme. But I thought he was hilarious, and it was kind of the same thing, but Tosh.0 was a lot funnier and a lot more edgy. I never thought The Soup was all that funny, and I never thought Joel McHale was funny, but I loved him in playing Community as Jeff Winger. And then you have Aba Nadir, which was funny. It was like a running gag because I don't know what the actor's race or nationality is, but it's clear he looks very Indian, and they even mentioned it in the one episode. It was I can't remember the name of the episode, but it was the episode where Frankie had already, taken over, and she was trying to stop the paintball because she was trying to stop it. It went underground, and it was the janitorial staff that was starting the paintball up again. And he mentioned that Abir was Indian, and they go, he's Arab, and he was like, okay, we'll go with that. Like, clearly he looks very Indian. He doesn't look Arab at all. Well, I'm not saying he looks like Arab at all, but he looks Indian, and but he's Arab on the show, or half Arab on the show. Then of course you have Britta Perry, who's the resident dumb blonde but very endearing, and then Annie Edison, who is the resident we'll get into Annie in a second. And then you have Pierce Hawthorne, who's our resident lovable racist friend. Troy Barnes, who was a little bit confusing. Like, if we go through the characters, I feel like Troy Barnes was he was a confusing character because I don't think they really knew what to do with Troy and Britta. Those are the two characters I think had the most confusing story arc, because Britta didn't start off as a dumb blonde. She really didn't. They even mentioned it in one episode where Jeff talks about how he goes, I can't believe I thought you were smart, because as the show progressed and it got more ridiculous and more outrageous, Britta's personality gets more ridiculous and more outrageous, and she becomes the punching bag of the group. And that's one thing I was going to talk about that a little bit later, but that's one thing I did not like about the show and the interaction between the characters, that Britta was everybody's punching bag because she just got progressively more dumb as the seasons went on. Troy Barnes was another character that was a little weird because when it starts off, he's like the hotshot popular football player on the show. But I think it works with Troy and people don't really question it too much because Community is a show that is kind of ridiculous. And so even if we take Troy being the hotshot football player, All-American, that guy, popular, Brad Pitt character of his school, it's in the world of Community. So, you know what I mean? So it's not, you don't take it too serious, but he was supposed to be that guy. And then as the show progressed, he becomes best friends with Abed, and he almost reverts back to being like this innocent, childlike boy character, where there are plenty of times where Shirley makes references towards him being with Britta, and him not knowing about sex, or him being too innocent to engage with sex with Britta. And I'm like, wasn't he like the hotshot, like, football player at his high school? You telling me he wasn't banging out girls back in high school? Like, they set it up where he was like, he really wasn't that guy. Like, the reason that he didn't end up going to a university and playing football there and carrying on his football career was because he really couldn't stand the pressure. Now, but I think that's a little bit different than how they set up his character later on. Like, it's one thing to say, hey, I couldn't take the pressure of being a football player, but he lived in that world where he was like one of the most popular football players so you're telling me a bunch of dudes, high school dudes in locker rooms didn't talk about sex, and then they go on with the character and the development of the character, and he almost reverts back to being like childlike, like Abed. And it was like, is he playing a role just to fit in with Abed? Because I'm like, I know you know about sex. Like, what are you talking about? It's like he reverted backwards. And so that didn't make a whole lot of sense. So some of the things they did with Troy's character didn't make a whole lot of sense. And I didn't like how Britta's character just kind of progressively got more and more dumb and more of the punching bag of the group. And then, of course, you have Dean Pelton, who is my absolute favorite. It's a toss-up between Dean and Chang, and which ones are my favorite character, because I feel like their story arcs and their characters just progressively got funnier and funnier as the show went on, and it never went backwards. It just always got funnier. And then we have some honorable mentions, which were Magnitude, Frankie, and Rich. Magnitude was just a character which the show was very, again, this is before wokeism kind of took over, and you could do a lot more things on in entertainment that were offensive before. You can't do those things now. And Magnitude was that token black character, but he was set up to be a token black character. He came on and literally he had braids, and the only thing I think the only thing he said, period, was pop pop. I mean, he talked, but everything ended with pop, pop. That was his catchphrase, pop, pop. So whatever he said was pop, pop. So he was like that token black character that really didn't have any personality or story development behind him, but he was there to be the cool black character on the show. And so, those are my favorites, when it comes to the characters but also what I loved about the show was the music, and I'm not a musical person. So the fact that this show had so much music on it and it was so musical really shocked me, because I thought that was going to be the one thing I turned off the most. I was like, I cannot stand singing on shows. I don't like musicals. This is not going to be for me. But whoever wrote the music for this show deserves, I don't know what awards the show got while it was on, because I didn't watch it on network television. I didn't watch it until it came on Netflix. So I don't know what type of awards the show won, but it deserved all of the awards for the music, because the music was absolutely great. I listen to the music from this show to this day because it is great, it is catchy, and it is hilarious. My favorite all-time song, well, actually it's a toss-up between two songs, and it's the balloon song, the episode where they go on the hot air balloon. It's an adventure. Oh, don't get me singing, I'm not doing that. But that song is amazing. I love it. I think, what's her name? What is her name? How come I can never remember these people's names? It was so long ago. The balloon, I'm about to look it up, because she deserves to be mentioned. And it was the singer who was the singer on there? Hold on 1 second. It was Sarah Bareilles. I don't know how many people remember Sarah Bareilles, but she was a singer. I thought I heard that she had written the song. I'm not sure. I'm not about to really do a deep dive into it because I really don't have that much more time on this podcast. But I think it was written in collaboration with the show's composer, Ludwig Göransson. But I don't know if she had anything to do with it, but she's on the episode and she sings. But that song is amazing. I absolutely, my favorite. But again, it was a toss-up between that song and Britta is a Bee. And Britta is a Bee was sung by Britta's ex-boyfriend, the one guy who had the small nipples. I can't remember the character's name. And Pierce. The fact that they put Pierce in that song, and he just, in the song, he's just, she's a goddamn bee. And it just is hilarious. It's freaking hilarious. I'm like, they did not put Pierce in the song. They did, and it was hilarious. Also, like anything Troy and Abed. Troy and Abed in the morning. Anything with Troy and Abed and they're singing and they're rhyming, I love it. It's just great. So those are some of my favorite songs on the show. They had a lot more, but those are my favorites. Now, we can get into... Hold on, guys. I got to get comfortable. We're going to get into... some things that I don't like about the show, because there are things that I don't like about the show. And one of the things that I don't like about the show, I've already mentioned, was how mean everyone was to Britta. Didn't really feel it. I like Britta as a character. Clearly, she got dumber and dumber and dumber as the seasons went on, because it became her shtick to be dumber, not just to be the dumb blonde. I think when the show started and she was a little bit more serious in like the first couple episodes, it wasn't like the show got more ridiculous as it went on, and her character became more ridiculous, and she became more of a trope, more of a dumb blonde. And so, but in all honesty, I thought Britta was a great character. She was very loving and caring, and she cared about people the most. And I don't know if that ever got acknowledged by the group, while they were always, constantly ragging on her about Britta and things, and, saying that she's the worst. She was actually the best. She was loving and caring, and she cared about people so deeply. She cared about causes, and that was the thing that was really a standout about how much she cared about people, and that's what I really, really loved about Britta's character. So I didn't like that they picked on her so much. Now, who I secretly did not like, which is probably not going to be a surprise to you, was Annie. Annie, I don't know if anybody's ever mentioned how incredibly vindictive Annie was. She was vindictive. She was really a closeted mean girl, and she was incredibly jealous. Like, if you know her backstory, she had a thing for Troy when they were in high school. They went to high school together. She was the nerdy, overachiever. She got hooked on drugs. Not drugs, like recreational drugs. Like, she used to take stimulants to stay up so she can continue to be the A1 student that she was. The pressure got too much for her, being ignored by everyone, and Troy got too much for her, and she ended up going to rehab and blah, blah, blah. But she's genuinely a really mean, vindictive person. And there was even an episode where it was after, I think it was in the last season, when they were in Shirley's shop, and it was them trying to take down Frankie. And it was a quote by, but this is after the episode where, so in the episode where Save Greendale episode, where they had to go find the founder of Greendale, Jeff and Britta decided that they're going to get engaged. And Annie's reaction to that entire Jeff made his decision. He made his choice. And throughout the entire show, he always chose to be back with Britta. No matter how much he hated her or didn't like her, he always chose Britta. He never could really make it work with Annie because she was too young, and he wasn't interested in being a better version of himself that Annie and Britta were always trying to make him. But he consistently always chose Britta, right? Annie was such a pick-me character. If you don't know what a pick-me female is, go Google it. But she was a pick-me when it came to Jeff, It was even an episode where Frankie and the wedding was one of the last episodes in the 5th season where Frankie mentions that we have to get Annie away from Jeff, because she was, obsessed with, getting Jeff. It was unhealthy. And then when he chooses Britta again and decides that he's going to marry her, regardless of how toxic that relationship is, it's not like Jeff and Annie's relationship wasn't toxic. She absolutely acts like a child and has a fit. And then after that episode is when they have the episode where they're trying to take down Frankie. They're back in Shirley's Chandler shop. Abed is there. And Britta makes a comment that Frankie suggests or said that Annie was a stuck-up bitch. And Annie says, well, she suggested or something along those lines. And then Britta goes, Frankie suggests that Annie is a stuck-up bitch who thinks she's better than everyone else. And it was the first time that I had seen on the show somebody really acknowledged that Annie really is just a jealous, stuck-up bitch. Like, she kind of chased after every guy that Britta, it was the episode where Britta that's mentioned. I can't remember what episode it was. I think it was maybe the one where everything blew up with Jeff, and they found out that Jeff and Britta were sleeping together, and that Jeff had kissed Annie, or not the episode where they were sleeping together, but the episode after the Britta and Jeff I love you fiasco, and then they found out that after Britta had told Jeff that announced it to the school that she was in love with him, that he went and kissed Annie, and then everything blew up from there. It was that episode where Britta finally calls Annie out about just being it's like the little sister who's jealous of the big sister, so she runs around and sleeps with every guy or tries to steal every guy that the big sister has. That's kind of what Annie is, and she's kind of annoying in that way. So she's secretly one of my characters I hate the most, but I loved her as a character on the show. Like I said, even the characters I hate, I love as characters on the show, because the parts of them that you hate is what makes the show the show. They all have parts in them that you hate, all of them. They're flawed characters. And that's what makes the show so great. Pierce Hawthorne is one of my all-time favorite characters. I'm going to get into Pierce in a second because Pierce is a whole... I think I'm going to have to do a part 2 of this because I have so much more to talk about when it comes to the show. So I'm actually going to slow down and I'm actually going to just say what I want to say, because I didn't think that I had this much to say about Community, and I've been kind of going fast. I'm like, oh my God, I'm at 16 minutes already and I haven't even gotten through half of why I love Community and why this show is so great. So I'm going to slow down. I'm just going to take my time, say the rest of what I have to say, and then I'm going to do a part 2 of why Community is so great, because I haven't even gotten through half of it. So let's go back. So yes, I didn't like how they treated Britta. I didn't like Annie, as a person or a character. I loved her as a character, but I hated her as well. But the reason that I hate her is the reason why I love her. And then Pierce Hawthorne. Let's talk about, because I think the next 10 minutes is probably going to be spent on me talking about the next 2 characters that I'm going to talk about, which is Pierce Hawthorne and Shirley. I have an actual personal story about Shirley, so I feel like I should get to that first. So Shirley. Let's talk about Shirley. Shirley, I loved as a character because at first I thought she would, I gotta get the actress's name that played her, which is, Yvette Nicole Brown. So I have a story about Yvette Nicole Brown, which it's the tea. I'm gonna give you some tea here on Yvette Nicole Brown, so stay tuned for that. I'll give that to you at the end. But right now we'll talk about Shirley. So Shirley Bennett was the mom, the married wife on the show, and I thought I would end up hating her voice that she puts on this show. She does this voice on the show that is meant to be the polar opposite of the angry black woman trope that always get played on every show. Anytime they have a black female, they can have black men as token characters all the time on shows. It's just normal. But anytime there's a black female on the show, she has to be heavy set. She has to be angry, loud, and sassy. And or not angry, but just sassy and loud and overly confident, right? That is like the black woman trope on TV shows. And she can't be overly attractive for whatever reason, because she can't compete with the attractive white girls on the show. That is the trope. And if you want proof of that, you can watch Parks and Rec, because they had that character on Parks and Rec. People loved her, but again, it's a trope that always gets played with black women on TV shows. So Shirley was like the opposite of that, where it was actually an episode. It was one of, it's almost my favorite. I think it is my favorite episode. I think I put it down as my favorite episode, but the episode where they shoot a commercial for Greendale, and Shirley's playing in the commercial, and Dean Pelton goes, can you be, he was trying to tell her to be a little bit more stereotypical black girl, right? And Yvette Nicole Brown comes on, or not back on, Shirley Bennett, the character, she comes on and she goes, the word that he's looking for, he's like, what's the word that I'm looking for? And she goes, the word that he's looking for is sassy. And then she says it in a very, that tone that she has on the show is, very sweet and complete opposite of the stereotypical black girl. And then she immediately switches to, he better hopes he don't find it, which is the sassy black woman. But it's like, you better not find that trope and try to put me in it, because we'll have problems. And so they played into that, and I thought I would get really, really annoyed with her voice, but because of why they made her speak that way and have that voice as a commentary on that trope of black women on shows, it was funny, and it was always funny. So that's one of my favorite characters. Okay, so I know you want to hear the tea about Yvette Nicole Brown, but first I'm going to talk about Pierce Hawthorne, and then I'll give you the tea, and then I'll close it out, and then you have to come back for part 2, because I did not think I had this much to say about the show, but apparently I do. Pierce Hawthorne is one of my favorite characters. He's one of the great characters on television. And Joel McHale, he did a podcast. I actually had to, because I was like, oh my God, I can believe it, but I didn't want to believe it because he is one of my favorite characters on the show. And he's a legend, and you just have never heard, I've never heard, and it's not like I know that much about Chevy Chase in general, so I can't say that it's not out there, but it's this running story or commentary or knowledge that Chevy Chase is racist due to his behavior on this show. And you've had Childish Gambino, who is Danny Glover. I really know him as Childish Gambino because I love him as a rapper. But Danny Glover has spoken out plenty of times about how he doesn't like Chevy Chase and thinks he's racist and things of that nature. There's been rumors and stories about him on the set being racist and things of that nature. Now, the character on the show is racist. He's the lovable racist on the show. And he says a lot of inappropriate things. Like the show, like I said, it was before wokeism, and it was very racist in that way. Funny racist, but racist, right? And he played into a lot of those racism. So the story goes, this is the story that Joel McHale told on a podcast about the show. He tells the story of why Chevy Chase hated being on the show. He hated playing the character, and why he had such a hard time while he was on the show. Which is a pain. And basically everybody who worked with Chevy said he was an absolute pain on that show, which is crazy because he stayed on that show for years. It wasn't like 1 or 2 seasons and he left. He stayed on it, 4 or 5 seasons? Maybe 4 seasons. I think he was gone by the 5th season, but he stayed on for years. And he was a main character. So that must have really been a pain to have to deal with him. But in the process of Joe telling the story, it didn't sound like Chevy was being racist to me, because they asked about, like, why are these claims that he was racist? And there were stories about Chevy not wanting to play the racist character. Like, he did not want to say the things that Pierce says on the show, which are very racist, and he didn't like it. And so he went to one of the producers or director or somebody behind the scenes, and he goes, he doesn't want to say the N-word, nigger. He doesn't want to say nigger. I said, I'm black. This is my podcast. I'm going to say the word. It's the word. You shouldn't say it in relation to people, but I hate how sometimes the word nigger gets like the N-word. Like, you can't say the word in exposition. Like, nobody's calling anyone a nigger. It's a word. So he says nigger. He said, I don't want to say nigger, or the N-word. Or he doesn't ever say that on the show, but he was just addressing his character and how racist his character was, right? Or something along the lines of that. And he says the word nigger. So he gets this reputation for being racist, but it was like he was trying to combat the racism of his character. So I don't know if that's the full story, but that's the story that was told. And if that's the case, that doesn't make Chevy Chase racist. So I don't know if there's something else, and if you know, or honestly, I don't care to know. I don't care to look it up. I'm not a huge fan of Chevy Chase. I'm not out here trying to cancel Chevy Chase. It's like his career is over and gone. I don't really care what his personal views are. But if that was the story that was told and he got labeled as racist because of that, I think that's a little stupid. It doesn't mean he's racist. But now there might be other stuff, because Chevy Chase has been around for a long time, that I don't know about. And again, I would just wanted to know why people were calling him racist, based on the stuff that happened behind the scenes. And so I looked into it a little bit. I didn't really get the full story, but that's one of the stories. And I was like, oh, well, that doesn't really make him racist. So that's the Chevy Chase, behind the scenes stuff. But as Pierce Hawthorne, he was a great character. And even Joe McHale said on the podcast, had he embraced the character, 30 Rock, when Alec Baldwin did 30 Rock, and it was kind of like a reinvigoration of his career, because he was a big movie star, and then he does this TV show, and it was a huge hit, and it kind of reintroduced audiences to him. He was saying that Chevy Chase could have had the opportunity to do the same thing with Community, but he never really embraced it the way that Alec Baldwin did, or embraced being on 30 Rock and enjoyed the success from that. Because it's almost like you forget Chevy Chase was on Community unless you're a Community fan. But it was a great character. I freaking love Pierce Hawthorne. He was a great character. Now, with that being said, let's get into the story about Yvette Nicole Brown. I have 6 minutes to tell it, so here we go. Years ago, when I had a huge following on Twitter, I had a bunch of celebrities follow me on Twitter, like a lot. It was real talk. I had a lot of celebrities follow me on Twitter. This was back in the early days of The Walking Dead, and The Walking Dead fandom on Twitter was huge. Like, it was big. It was a huge thing. We would live tweet The Walking Dead every week, and it was huge. So I was a big part of the fandom, one of the more popular, like, Twitterers, fans who, tweeted during the live broadcast, or the live tweeting. And so a lot of people in the fandom kind of knew me, or however it goes, whatever. One of the celebrities that followed me was Norman Reedus and his manager. So 3 people in Norman Reedus' camp followed me. His manager at the time, who I don't know if that is still his manager, but his manager at the time followed me. Norman Reedus followed me, and also Sean, what is his name? Sean, I'm about to look it up because I really honestly cannot remember. Boondock Saints. The other guy from Boondock Saints. Sean Patrick Flannery. Sean Patrick Flannery, Norman Reedus, and Norman Reedus' manager followed me on Twitter, right? And Shirley, Yvette Nicole Brown, who plays Shirley on Community, was also super huge in the fandom. Super freaking huge in the fandom. I might have to do this on part 2. This might be your reason for tuning into part 2. Okay, so anyway, she was super huge in the fandom. She, hosted a lot of the panels at the Comic-Con. She was frequently on what was the show? Talking Dead, which premiered after Walking Dead. So she was huge, and she would live tweet with the fans and everything every week as well. So what ended up happening was, I don't know if she particularly knew who I was because Norman Reedus followed me. I'm just like, I never had a personal relationship with Norman Reedus. They just followed me on Twitter. I did talk with, one time I got Norman Reedus' manager to respond to me on Twitter. It was like 3-something in the morning. I was working as a security guard overnight, and I was playing Assassin's Creed. And it's so funny because Norman Reedus' manager at the time was a part of my obsession with Assassin's Creed, because it was the very first Assassin's Creed game that I ever played. I know you're thinking, get to the story. I'll get there. It was the very first Assassin's Creed game that I played on my PS4. It was Assassin's Creed. It was the one with the woman. It was the one that nobody talks about. It was Assassin's Creed Liberation, Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation, and nobody talks about Liberation in the grand scheme of Assassin's Creed, but it was an amazing game. It was the first game that got me hooked on Assassin's Creed. It was so much fun. But I was obsessed with playing this game. I was a security guard at night, and I used to play it at night, and I got really stuck on the game and really frustrated. And I think I was tweeting about how frustrated I was on the game, and he just responded to me on Twitter, and then he ended up following me, and then Norman followed me, and then Sean Patrick Flannery followed me, and then I had some other celebrities follow me as well. I had some of the guys I had a bunch of celebrities follow me. It was a bunch. And so I had a big following on Twitter at the time that I just completely got rid of, because it was years. This is before everybody purged Twitter. I was like over Twitter way before then. But at the time, I had this huge following, I had a lot of celebrities, and I was really big on a Walking Dead kind of fandom. And so anyways, it was one of the episodes of Walking Dead. We were all live tweeting it, having a good time on Twitter. Yvette Nicole Brown is there, and people are, retweeting her tweets about The Walking Dead and things of that nature. And I'm going to have to stop, and I will pick up part 2 of this with my Yvette Nicole Brown tea story. I promise I will. But I did not think this would go 30 minutes. But this is a good reason for you to tune in for part 2. I see you over there.